Like dating is really just a big game of seeking validation for a lot of people. Like just trying to get validated. Just have someone finally like you. Like I don't care if I like them. It's like, ooh, I just got some attention. That's nice. And there's nothing more validating as a human being than to be told I love you by another human being. So to say like, I love you. And I think a lot of people can get caught up in that chase of getting that feeling when you might know that this guy isn't even right for you. All right, I have a question for everyone listening to this podcast. Have you ever been talking to a girlfriend about a guy that you've been dating? You've been with the guy for 2-3 months, and then your friend goes, wait a minute, he hasn't told you he loves you yet? And it's like, slow motion. Like, wait a second. When should I expect him to say I love you? Should he say I love you? Should he not? Is it too early? Is it not? Like, and I think, Gary, in today's podcast, we are addressing one of the biggest milestones in any new relationship. And it's so crazy to me because it's 3 freaking words. 3 words. That's it.
Very simple.
But the significance of these words are very impactful and very, very intense for both women and men. And I think it throws a lot of people off early on in a relationship. And just as a teaser, it definitely did in my relationship. So we'll get to that a little bit later.
Ooh, dun, dun, dun.
Ooh, teaser.
Yeah,
right,
I mean, so for 3 simple words, it really does become a big, big outsized deal. And it's because it's not the 3 words in some ways. And when you're really, and this is something our clients ask us all the time, is like, am I in the right relationship? He hasn't said I love you. And it's really what they're asking, is this guy for real? Is he ever going to love me? Part of what they're asking is, am I lovable? And really it comes down to like, am I going to get my heart broken? And so what we're going to talk about today is when you hope he says it, like when you really want him to say I love you, and actually when you don't want him to say it, how, when it feels like it's taking too long, okay, so it's going to often feel like it's taking too long for him to say it, how that can be a good thing, but also how it can be bad. And then some mistakes people make. And 2 things we both know from all of our time coaching about saying I love you. What's the real truth about this whole situation? So
I love this topic. Well, I kind of do. Honestly, no, when I say I love this topic, I actually was saying the opposite before we started this podcast. So what am I talking about? But the way that you put this together, I love this because this is something that comes up all the time. And I'm always like, come on. Like it's 3 words. Like let's lower the temperature a little bit. So Gary, honestly, the topic itself is a little silly in many ways to me, but the way that you built this out, let's go. Because let me tell you, timing is everything when it does come to these words. Let's start with the guy who's a little bit too soon. This is the guy who by the second date says, I think I'm falling for you. Or you go away for a weekend with your friends and you've known him for 3 weeks, and within an hour of you being gone, you're like taking off on the flight, and he's like, I think I'm falling for you. And you're like, ugh, like, dude, like I liked you until like 2 minutes ago. Like I really did, but and the thing is, like, you got to be careful in these moments because the more that you're yearning for these 3 words, the I love you, the more susceptible you are to these disingenuous or fake I love yous. And maybe he's not disingenuous in that moment, but maybe he is. And we don't know. So what's the answer to all that? Slow it down with how soon you're really ready to say it. Because when you're ready to say it, like if you're ready to say it, it makes you extra eager for him to say it first. So that's my thoughts on it.
Yeah. And let's be clear. The too early I love you, particularly like some of the scenarios you're laying out, he doesn't love you. He can't, there's no way. It's impossible. He does not actually love you. What that is a sign of is love bombing, right? Just trying to use an early I love you to accelerate physical intimacy, right? To get you into the bedroom. It's perhaps a sign of his own neediness. It's a sign of his anxious attachment. But you have to earn affection. And if he doesn't really know you yet as a person, how could he possibly love you? What he loves about you is actually what he's lusting about you. And that's not what you want. And so that's
I,
why this too early thing is a problem.
I would go so far to say, and I don't know if we're kind of breaking some teasers later, but I would go so far to say that if someone says that I love you during the lust phase, the early phase of attraction, then it is not, then it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
It's not until you kind of leave the honeymoon period of a new relationship, once you're out of it and you're kind of like now just in tune with each other and you see all the flaws and you see all the quirks, that's the only time it can be real. That's why like all these dating shows and in 2 weeks they're getting married and blah 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 blah. It's like, oh, can you do a follow-up series in a year for this one? Like, I want to see where they're really at, you know?
Yeah.
You can't do it.
Mostly not together.
Right. Right.
Right. So, I think, with this whole idea of someone saying I love you too soon, I think there is an exception where it's something that they said and it was a slip almost out of habit. Like you gave a little snort when you laughed and he said, "Oh, that's adorable. I love you." Right. And it's like an afterthought kind of thing. It's almost an accident that he's saying it and he's saying it because it just fit in that sentence. It's not an authentic proclamation of love. And so we keep saying when you say I love you too soon, it's problematic. So part of you have to be wondering like what counts as too soon. And so Adam, you found some stats. Do you want to share those stats with us?
I put on my nerd research glasses today. I'm taking over for Dr. Lewandowski with my research. On average, not to call you a nerd, Gary, but you can be with your dad jokes. On average, men say I love you in 107 days, or about 3.5 months.
Yeah, 3 months.
Into a new relationship. Whereas women tend to say these three words after 122 days. And there's a number of different pieces of research that we have, I believe, discussed here. Maybe we discussed in our coaching programs just about how men do tend to fall in love faster, depending on what we consider to be really love, than women do. But yeah, on average, about 3.5 months. Makes total sense. It's right at the point where that's what everyone would say. It's about 3 months is when you start to kind of get to that phase.
Yeah. So for guys, it's about 3 months. For women, it's about 4 months. And so that guy who's telling you he loves you at week 1, 2, or 3, red flag, clear red flag. And so guys saying I love you too soon, as much as everyone worries about when is he going to say, when's he going to say it, that too soon thing is a problem. When he says it, what feels like too late, that could go either way. So that could be a good thing or a bad thing. So the bad thing, this is your worst case scenario. This is where your mind automatically goes when you're waiting on an I love you. It's he doesn't like me. He's disinterested. He's stringing me along. It could be that he's avoidantly attached. It could be that he doesn't really like you. So he's purposefully keeping you at a distance so he doesn't get hurt and you don't get hurt. And so this is the side that it's like the nightmare scenario of, I like this guy. I feel like I love him, but he hasn't said he loved me yet. What is going on? And you just keep that on repeat forever.
Or worse, what if he doesn't know how to love? I've heard that before. I'm with a guy, he doesn't know how to love. And I'm like, well, how long have you been dating? Yeah, about 3 months. Okay. Let's give him a little time. 4 months. Okay. All right. Okay. Interesting. It could be it could be that. But when you get into the good side of it being a little bit later than the average.
Yeah. So we started off by saying, this is one of our clients' most common questions is like, he hasn't said it. Why is that? What's going on? And I had a client who from the start of the program came in the program single, lots of struggles, very quickly in the program hit her stride, so to speak, right? Dating a guy. And she would just come to our masterminds every week and just say, this guy's amazing. He's amazing. And this went on for a couple of months. But then she started saying, he's amazing, but, right? I was like, but what? But he hasn't said, I love you. And I'm like, don't worry about it. Not a big deal. And she would sigh and you could tell she didn't really believe me. And I was saying, like, everything sounds great. Don't worry about this. You don't know what's going on. Just don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. I promise. Okay. Then she comes, another mastermind. She says, Gary, you're not going to believe this. I'm like, uh-oh, what? Like, uh-oh. He said, I love you. I was like, he did? Whoa. I'm like, and now she's thrilled. Now everything's perfect. Everything's fine. There's no problems anymore in the world. And I said, I forget what her name was, but it was like, why? Did he explain why? And she said, he did. And he explained why. And his reason why he didn't say I love you was that those three words to him meant the world. And he didn't want it to be cheap. He didn't want it to say it just too early to cheapen the experience. It meant something really important to him. So he wanted to wait to say it until he was for sure. And I was
Right.
like, oh, like that's what you want. That's the good scenario of why it's taking so long.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that this is a perfect time to tell you about how long it took me to tell Jessica I loved her. And there's a little bit of a backstory. I believe I've told this before, but I might as well tell again for our new listeners, which is previous to Jessica, I was dating a woman and we had been dating for like seeing each other. I was traveling a lot at the time, but off and on for like 5 months or whatever. And I remember she was kind of pushing for the I love you. And I was like, oh, I'm not really there yet. And it just, honestly, I was kind of not into the relationship, but I said, I love you to this previous girlfriend. And she was elated, very excited. But it was at that moment that I knew I didn't love her. And it was devastating. It was so bad. It was one of those moments I'm like, what did I do? And we ended up breaking up pretty shortly thereafter. And it was a very, very bad breakup. And it was like one of those, why did you say I love you if you didn't mean it? I'm like, I felt it, but then I didn't when I said it. And it's like, it's just one of those moments like, hey, we're all human. Like I've been doing this for a long time. And I'm like, I should know better. I mean, this was 12 years ago. So give me a break. But then I meet Jessica. We start dating January 1. I didn't say I love you until May 22nd. And she puts in the calendar to remind me of how long it took. And I did that because of exactly what you just said, which is I didn't want to say something. And dude, I knew I love this girl like 4 months in, 4 weeks in, 5 weeks in. Like, I mean, I'm still in the lust phase, so okay, that goes against my previous point. But like, I really knew 3 months in. I was in it, like super in it. But I still waited. I waited. I waited. And then the first thing I said, I remember saying, I love you. And she's like, what took you so long?
It's a great response.
Dude, what took you so long? And I'm like, I kind of explained. She's like, okay, that makes sense. Cool. I love you too, by the way. Cool. So that's my I love you story. But 5 months, 22 days.
That's, based on your earlier stats, a little long. So what did you take you so long? You're a little behind.
Yeah, it was just, again, it was like not wanting to go through that PTSD that I went through and that poor woman went through with that
Right.
last breakup, where it was like, those words are very, very heavy.
Yeah.
It's almost like one of those things, it's much easier to break up before that's said. And then after that's said, you're really in it with a person. It's just another level of commitment. So,
Yeah, and I
anyways,
think, that story about that previous woman brings us very nicely to, I think there's two big mistakes that people make around this whole I love you thing. And one of them is don't force it, right? It sounded from how you were telling it that she was kind of forcing you into it and wanting you to say it sooner and really pushing. It's a bad idea for exactly, the reason that Adam just described is it can backfire. But I also think even if you're pushing a partner to say I love you, let's say you get exactly what you want and he says I love you. Are you convinced? You're not. You're not even convinced because now he said it under duress. The only reason he said it is because you forced him to. It wasn't authentic. And now you're right back to where you started. And so that brings us to the second mistake, which is don't push it so much and don't try to extract it out of him, even if he's not saying it. And what I mean by that is something I call hanging on half phrases. So there is the full on, I love you. But then there's a lot of other phrases around I love you that you will try to, like a private eye, just kind of read the signs and be like, I think it's coming. Like he'll say things like, I'm falling for you. Okay. Or he might give you a love you. You're like, oh, it's coming. Or good
mm,
night, my love. He might tell you that you're so lovable. Or he might even ask, you know what I love about you? All the You don't want to start taking those phrases and making it all about, is he going to say it? When's he going to say it? Because all of that stuff doesn't matter.
Garrett, can I tell you something that has made my life very awkward my entire life with bringing girls back to my family home?
What's that?
My family and I have a tradition, and it is before we eat food, dinner together. We're not a religious family, so my dad made up this thing. Instead of praying before we eat, we hold hands and we say, "I love you, I love you, I love you." It's very
Aw.
cheesy. It's a very
Aw.
cheesy, but it's a sweet thing. All my friends do it. We all do it. We're gonna do it, Gary, next time
Okay.
together. It's a very nice thing. It's something my dad started when I was like 10. But let me tell you, when you bring a girl back and you've been dating her for a month and you gotta hold her hands and say, "I love you, I love you, I love you," it's like I'd have to be like, "Ma, don't do the I love you thing, please." And she's like, "Nope, we're doing this is what we do. This is what we do." I'm like,
Right,
it's
because
so
you don't want to be the girl sitting there trying to like sneak a peek over. Is like, is he making eye contact when he's
I was
saying?
not
Is he
making eye
staring
contact.
at the ceiling? Is he,
I'm like looking at my mom and my dad. I love you. I love you. Like, no,
I
not
love
looking
you,
at her.
not you as much, but you.
I gotta say though, now I love to be like the dad in that situation when like a buddy of mine has a new girl he's dating, and they'll be like, "Dude, don't do the I love you thing." We're like, my wife and I would be like, "We're doing the I love you thing. Like we're doing it. Sorry, it's just what we do." And just to watch them squirm in their chair.
It's only
Oh,
fair. You got to pass that kind of stuff on. You have to pass it on.
so
Oh,
anyways,
you
I
know, I just
digress.
said a second ago, you don't want to hang on to half phrases about I love you because here's the truth. There are two true statements about the I love you thing that we've alluded to during this podcast that we want to make sure you leave with. Number one truth, saying I love you doesn't actually matter. Right. And I actually had prepared this thing where I was going to ask Adam the exact moment when he said I love you and who said it first, because I was pretty sure he wasn't going to know. I was wrong.
I got the date.
He knew.
I actually left those in the notes just to throw you off at this moment. So yeah, I got it, Gary. I know.
Because
What
it's
about
funny when
you?
I've
Do you know? Let's
no
put you on
idea,
this.
no idea
Terrible husband.
at
Terrible
all.
husband. I
And
got the date.
to be fair, I asked my wife about this. She has no idea either. And so I asked her about this after I did a mastermind when this whole I love you thing came up with the client I was talking about earlier. I said, Kyle, I gotta ask you, like, who in our relationship said I love you first? She's like, I have no idea, but it was probably you. Fair. That's probably true. I don't actually remember if that's true or not. I was like, do you remember when it was? She's like, no. I'm like, do you remember when you said I love you first? She's like, I have no idea.
Oh,
And that's the point. Because when you say, like, once you're in a long term relationship with somebody, it doesn't matter. When you're dating, it feels like the world's most important thing. But in the grand scheme of things, like you find a couple who's been married 50 years, ask them, how many days. And most people are not going to be like Adam and they know the exact day and number of all that. That most people just aren't going to know because it's not what's important.
yeah. And it really is one of those things that are so like so much of what we do here at Love Strategies with our clients is we redirect our clients to focus less on the words that people are saying and much more on the actions and the behaviors that their partner is taking. So call it audio versus video. Audio is, "Baby, I love you so much. You're so perfect, baby." Blah, blah, blah. And then I disappear for 2 weeks and I don't answer any texts and I don't want to see you. And the other one is a guy who is clearly pushing things forward, but he might be a little bit more reserved and more cautious with his words. I would any day of the week take the person who is video. They're showing up, they're taking the actions, they got the behaviors. Oh my God, is this person in? But doesn't have the audio yet. Now that's within reason. Now, I mean, one thing we haven't mentioned are those outlier cases when it's like a year into dating and I love you hasn't been exchanged. Taking those out of it, I think we should probably spend a few minutes on that because I have a feeling a lot of people listening to this, and I know maybe that wasn't in your notes, but we should probably spend a few minutes on that. But taking those out of the equation, any day, I will take the video, the person who's showing up versus just the person who's talk all day long, how special you are, how much they want to marry you in the future, blah, 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 blah. Like, who cares?
Yeah. It's easy to say almost anything. And a
Yeah.
lot of the good guys and the very manipulative guys can both be really good with words. And one thing is for sure, the manipulative guys are definitely good with words. And so that's why the words, they're not zero importance, but you want to be very careful about relying on them too much. But and what you absolutely have to look at are the behaviors. And this is the point I was making to our client is she would describe all these great things, super thoughtful, caring things that this guy was doing for her. I'm like, he clearly cares. He clearly loves you. And it's like simple things. It's like making your favorite meal when you had a hard day. It's reminding your partner when they're driving to put on their seatbelt or not check their phone while they're driving because you're trying to keep them safe. It's knowing how your partner takes their coffee or what their favorite ice cream flavor is. It's, giving them a snack when they've had a tough day. It's, warming up their side of the bed before they get in when the sheets are cold. Like, it's just like silly little things that we do for the people we love on a day-to-day basis. Like, that stuff matters so much more than how many days it was into the relationship when you actually heard the three words that you were hoping to hear.
Because all of those things require thoughtfulness. Like when you truly care, it's hard to be thoughtful about a person if you don't really care about them. It's actually impossible because how can you be thoughtful about a person if you don't care? Right. So if you are doing those things and you know for a fact that, your partner doesn't like a cold bed when they get in, they want to warm it up so you get on their side. Like that's really, really sweet and caring. That's thoughtful. You care about that human being. Saying just a couple of words, sweet nothings in someone's ear is so easy. It's so, so easy to just say that without anything to back it up. So this is very, very important for those of you out there who are with a guy who uses his words so much, but doesn't actually back it up with action.
Yeah. So the second truth about I love you is this whole thing's about, when is he going to say it? When is he going to say it? And the second truth is that's actually the wrong question, because when you're asking, when is he going to say I love you? It's essentially you wondering, does he love me? Now, it's not unimportant, but the better question, the one you should actually care about is, how do you feel about him? Because too often the mistake that we see women make is they decide how they feel about the guy based on how he feels about them. And that's not good enough, right? It's not, oh, he likes me. He said he loves me. Oh, I guess I like him enough to be in a relationship then. That's how you end up in a mediocre relationship that runs out of steam after a couple months. You have to start asking yourself, the key question is not when he says I love you. It's, do I love him? Why do I love him? How do I know? What signs are there? What's the important piece? And the key lesson is put yourself first, in the sense of you have to care as much about how you feel as you care about how they feel. The mistake we make is we care way too much about what the other person feels, and we put ourselves very much in a secondary position. And so, most important relationship you have in your entire life is with yourself. You have to put yourself first.
So true. And I think when we're dating, like dating is really just a big game of seeking validation for a lot of people. Like just trying to get validated, just have someone finally like you. Like I don't care if I like them. It's like, ooh, I just got some attention. That's nice. And there's nothing more validating as a human being than to be told I love you by another human being. To say like, I love you. And I think a lot of people can get caught up in that chase of getting that feeling when you might know that this guy isn't even right for you. I've had clients who are literally like, might be talking to a guy and he doesn't meet their love vision, and it's very clear that he's not right for them. And we coach and coach and coach. And there's still, I know in that back of their mind, they're like, I kind of want to get that validation. And we work with them. So it's like, we're not chasing after that feeling. We're chasing after the long game, which is finding the right person that we're truly in love with, who we actually love as well. And I think it's such a vicious trap you can get into. So I think that's really important. Now, Gary, I know we're kind of at the end of this, but should we just end it by having an open conversation about the outliers? Because I know we didn't talk about that, and I kind of tease that.
Sure.
I'd be curious on your thoughts. If you're with a person and it's been, let's go 8 months, 10 months, a year, and they haven't yet told you that they love you?
Red flag.
What are your thoughts?
Red flag for sure. Because I think, we talked about a little bit about the stats. And so, it's typical about 3-4 months. Now, if that's the average, without getting too stat nerdy about it, you know, 6 months is probably the upper limit of, if you don't know in 6 months, are you ever going to know? Like, what haven't you found out in the first 6 months? Right.
Right.
And so, it's all about dating is about finding out information. It's about learning about the other partner. It's about learning to see if you're compatible. It's learning if you're going to have friendship. The attraction piece you have long since figured out or should have. And so what else, within 6 months, you should have a pretty good sense of all of those things. So there's more going on if someone's not saying I love you within that time frame, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And just to be clear, like if you are following the little love steps and you're now little love step, what we call number 6, that means you are in an exclusive, committed relationship that has been discussed, that it's just you and him. You are, for lack of a better term, your boyfriend, girlfriend, completely focused on each other. If from that point forward, it's getting to, I would push it a little bit further, maybe 7, 8 months max. That is where we're getting into a major risk component. And that's at the point where, and maybe at 6 months, you could have a pretty direct conversation with him. It doesn't have to be like, why haven't you said I love you? It's not like, let's get drunk and do 10 shots and be like, you don't love me, you haven't said it yet, right? Which is how a lot of people might feel at that moment. It's just like, it comes out like, why haven't you said it? But it could be like, hey, look, I just want to have like an honest conversation. Like I'm at a stage in my life where I am looking for like a partner, like a lifelong partner. And we have been dating for a while now. And I'd just love to get a feel from you about like where your head's at with all of this and where you see all this going. And like having a pretty direct conversation about that as a starting point, naturally, hopefully it kind of starts to come up. But we want to understand what's really going on here. Because if he's not saying I love you because he has an avoidant attachment style, we want to be able to uncover that and the deeper meaning behind that and where that might be coming from. Perhaps he might be jaded from a divorce that he just went through a couple months ago. He might open up to you about that. But by just at least having that direct of a conversation, something should come up. If he's like, no, babe, like everything's great, like I'm super happy, then I would dig in a little bit further. I'd be like, look, like I'm not feeling like we're kind of on the same path here. Like I care a lot about you. I've really enjoyed spending time. I'd love to deepen this connection. Hint, 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 hint. I'd love to deepen this further. And again, I feel like we're maybe a little bit disconnected here. And that's how I would approach it. I would not be personally in that situation where like, and again, this all is based on the idea that he's showing all video at this point, because he should be. We wouldn't be with someone if they're not showing video. If he's like putting in the actions, he's putting in everything, but we're just missing the words, that would be the time where I'd be having that kind of a direct conversation. But I couldn't imagine a situation personally where I would ask someone directly, why don't you love me? Because I don't feel like I would get a direct, real response from a person.
Yeah, I definitely would not ask it that way. The way I'm a fan of asking these kinds of questions I've noticed blank. How should I interpret that? Right. Like, so, I've noticed, we've been together for a long time. Everything's been going really great. But it's just something like I feel like I've noticed that you're reluctant to say I love you. And I'm just wondering how I should interpret that. And then pause and give him all the space to explain so that you're not giving him the answers to the test before he starts responding. Right. If you start saying, oh, it could mean this, or it could mean this, or it could mean this, like you're giving him all these different like just note the observation, ask how you should interpret this, and then see what he says. Because this is going to give you the thing that actually is the thing you want more than anything else, which is clarity. To the extent that you feel like you don't want to have this conversation, it means you need to have this conversation sooner rather than later, because you're worried about having it because you think this might end your relationship. But if just a simple conversation about something like this has the potential to end your relationship, you want to figure that out sooner rather than later, because there's nothing, you don't want to waste 6 months, but you also don't want to waste 6 years either.
Yeah. So what you just said was brilliant. I love it. I love you, Gary. But
Oh,
I would
I love you.
wait till the 6 month period before having that at a minimum. So this is us off the cuff kind of work. This is one of the murkiest kind of situations you can imagine when someone's in that situation. But everything that was just said, I completely agree with, and it's going to uncover the truth, and that's what you want to get to. So
Yeah. And that playbook that we just gave you is not to be used, use it for good, not evil. And so what I mean by don't use that at week 2, don't use that at month 2. That's a worst, it's 6 months and on, right? That's the time to, use those kinds of phrases and that kind of approach. Before that, you might ruin something that actually is pretty good.
6 months exclusive. If you're working the little love steps, that's how we would do it. But so, Gary, that was fun. Have I told you I love you? I love you, brother.
Not nearly
I
enough.
love
Now, I show you all the time, so that's what counts.
Do you love me, man? Come on, come on, come on. I've been noticing you haven't been responding to the way that I've just been noticing this. I'm not sure how to interpret that. So,
Needy,
you know.
needy.
He's not going to give it to me. He's not going to give me the validation I'm just searching for right now.
Refuse. Nope.
Oh, you see that? All right. Next week, we will have on a new podcast host. And no, thanks, Gary. This was super fun. And I'll talk to you all soon. Thanks, Gary.
All right. Love you, man.
Love you.